Well, as we have said, today is Super Bowl Sunday, and later this evening, the Kansas City Chiefs play the Philadelphia Eagles in Super Bowl 57. The Super Bowl, as you probably know, is the largest sporting event each year in the United States. It's likely that the trends of past years will continue, and somewhere above 112 million people will watch the Super Bowl tonight. And what we've done here today is what a lot of churches have done, and over the past 6 or 7 years, we've just taken advantage of the Super Bowl to do some fun things, offer a bit of change of pace to our service, and some years, like today, I have chosen to use the Super Bowl as sort of a launching pad for the message that I'm going to share today. Just launch that off of some football or Super Bowl theme. As I said, we call this Game Day Sunday, and we've already had these fun competitions here today. I hope that you'll stay with us and be a part of the game day tailgate after the service. We're going to have hot dogs and nachos and some other things, and it'll just be a good time of food and fellowship, and so I hope everybody will stay and be a part of that. As I considered what I wanted to share this Game Day Sunday, I was influenced in large part by something that happened 2 weeks ago in the AFC Championship game when the Cincinnati Bengals, the true best team in football, suffered a heartbreaking last-minute loss at the hands of the Kansas City Chiefs. Many of you probably saw that, or if you didn't see it, you may have read about it, but in the final minute of that game, the Bengals defense was trying desperately to keep the Kansas City Chiefs and their MVP quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, from marching down the field and getting a go-ahead score, which likely, with the amount of time on the clock, would end up being the winning score. And as they were doing that, a young Bengals football player made a critical mistake. As Patrick Mahomes, on this fateful play, ran the ball, he gained several yards, 10, 15 yards, something like that, and then he ran the ball out of bounds. And a young Bengals player by the name of Joseph Osai pushed Mahomes when he was already clearly out of bounds. It was an inexplicable thing to do. The players are taught not to do this. They know not to touch the quarterback anytime he's anywhere close to the sideline. But Osai did. He pushed Mahomes down. And he ended up with what always happens when you push the quarterback out of bounds, a 15-yard penalty. And in this case, that 15-yard penalty then put the Kansas City Chiefs in good enough field position that they were able to kick a rather easy field goal and secure the win and sent the Bengals to a heartbreaking defeat. Now, as a football fan who has gotten upset with a number of football players over the years for the mistakes they make, I was fairly upset with young Joseph Osai. But it did not take very long at all for my emotions to turn from upset or maybe even anger to compassion, because young Joseph Osai was clearly devastated by his mistake. He was devastated by his failure to refrain from committing that costly penalty. And as the time expired on the Bengals' heartbreaking loss, the camera showed young Joseph Osai, who actually had played a really good game before that mistake. He was sitting on the sidelines and he was visibly sobbing, completely inconsolable. Some teammates and coaches went over and they tried to comfort him, but he continued to sob. It really was a heartbreaking scene, and actually I worried for his mental and emotional well-being. From what I understand, he's doing well, but that night I was very concerned for this young man. He had committed a critical error in a huge moment, and you could just see that the disappointment of his failure was resting very heavy on him. It was a crushing failure. In sports and football, we are often primarily tempted, or we often primarily give our attention to the winners, to the thrill of victory and all of that. But in football, 31 out of 32 teams in their season unsatisfied with the results. Of the 14 teams that go to the playoffs each year, 13 in their season with a loss. And so essentially 31 out of 32 NFL teams in their seasons in failure. They failed to reach their goal. Neither of the teams in the Super Bowl this year were in it last year. So just last year, each of these teams ended their season in failure, and by the odds, each of these teams that are in the Super Bowl this year will end their seasons in failure next year. Everyone who plays football, everyone who plays any sport, experiences failure. One of the reasons many people believe sports is so good for young people, such good training for life, is because it teaches them to deal with adversity. It teaches kids to have to deal with failure, and those are valuable lessons because everyone fails in sports. Everyone fails in football, and everyone, literally everyone, experiences failures in life. No one is exempt from failure. The only way to never experience failure is to never try anything. And of course, that's its own type of failure, and I would say that's the worst failure of all. And so today, our focus isn't on the thrill of victory or setting big goals and achieving them. Our focus is different today. And I'd say today's focus is probably even more important than those topics, as important as they can be. Because here's the reality, everybody fails. Sometimes we fail in small ways that don't really impact us or those around us very much. Sometimes we fail in more important ways, ways that really can be troubling and discouraging either to ourselves or those around us. And then sometimes our failures are so significant, so consequential, that the weight of the failure really can actually become a big problem in our life. Here's another truth. We fail in every area of life. We just do. We have failures at work. We have failures in our relationships. We have failures in our education. We have moral failures. We fail God. And because failure is a universal experience, because of that, because everyone fails, we have to learn to deal with failure. We have to learn to face failure, and we have to learn to face it well. We have to learn to deal with failure in healthy ways. And so I want to talk for just a few minutes about responding to the disappointment of failure in a healthy way. I want to share how we can fail without being crushed by our failure. And there's a lot more that could be said, of course, than what I'm going to say today, but there are 4 simple but important things that I want to share today that I believe can guard us against allowing failure to become a crushing thing, a crushing weight in our lives. And so I want to share those with you now. When we fail, again, as we all do, one of the most important things that we can do in response to that is to remember who we are. When you fail, it's vitally important that you remember who you are. You just have to do this. Genesis 1:27 says this, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them." Imago Dei is the theological term that is applied to this passage, which simply means the image of God. Genesis 1:27 tells us that each of us are the Imago Dei. We are the image of God. God himself created us in his image. Of all that God created, only human beings are created in his image. And this speaks to the uniqueness of humans' value to God. It speaks to the uniqueness of our relationship with God, and it speaks to the uniqueness of God's love and God's care for us. We are the Imago Dei. We are the image of God. Here's what Ephesians 2:4 and 5 say. "Because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you have been saved." And Romans 5:8 says, "God demonstrates his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." Understand what these passages teach us. Here's what it is. At the moment that we were at our worst, dead in transgressions, still sinners, at our worst, Christ died for us, and God made us alive in Christ. And so when we fail, we have to remember who we are. We're the Imago Dei. We're created in the image of God, and we're loved by God, and we're loved by God at our worst. This means that you have inherent value and worth that has nothing to do with success or failure. Has nothing to do with whether you got the big sale at work or instead you lost the contract. Has nothing to do with whether the girl said yes to your date invitation or rejected your date invitation. Has nothing to do with whether your spouse deems you delightful or deficient, and doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you honored Christ this week or had a significant moral failure in your life this week. You have inherent worth and value for no other reason than God created you in His image, and He loves you, irrespective of anything that you do or don't do. You are valuable based on who you are, not what you do. No matter the frequency or the significance of your failures, you're valuable for this reason, because of who you are. You are so valuable that God allowed His Son to die for you when you were at your very worst. And so when you fail, you have to remember this. This is where your identity, your value has to come from. Your value is not about your success or failure. Your value is about who you are. You are. You just are valuable, irrespective of anything else that's going on in your life. So when we fail, we have to remember who we are. And when we fail, the second thing that's important for us to do is to be willing to receive the support of family and friends. Failure should cause us to turn to those who love us, but oftentimes what we do is we pull away from those who love us in times of failure. We are loved by God, and we are loved by family members and friends, people that God has put into our lives to help us and to support us. After Joseph Osai made that horrible mistake that resulted in the other team getting the winning field goal, when he finally made his way to the locker room, the media came in to where the team was, and of course they wanted to talk to Osai. And the questions that at least one reporter asked him were really pretty inconsiderate and pretty awful questions. You know, questions like, so how did it feel to make that mistake in such a big moment? Oh, it felt great. Yeah, good. Or, what were you thinking when the Chiefs kicked the winning field goal? You know, just dumb, inconsiderate questions. And as the media gathered around Osai, and before they asked those dumb questions, one of his teammates was standing there with him, right by his side. The teammate was B.J. Hill. He's a really good defensive lineman. He's a big and tough man. And as the first dumb question was asked, Hill spoke up and defended his teammate, and here's what he said. Excuse my colorful language. It's not too colorful, just mildly colorful. So breathe, it'll be okay. But here's what B.J. Hill said in response to the first dumb question. He said, and he didn't have a pleased look on his face at all, dumb question. He says to the reporter, dumb question. Come on, this guy played his butt off. Next question. Yeah, he's not even going to answer that. Get to the next question. Then a minute or so later, another dumb, insensitive question was asked, and Hill defended his teammate again. He said, what? Come on, man. Ask a better question. And he would not let the reporter force an answer to these stupid questions. When we have failed, we all need friends like B.J. Hill. Now, here's what I'm guessing. I'm guessing B.J. Hill himself was a little frustrated with Joseph Osai's mistake. But here's what B.J. Hill kept in mind. He knew that his teammate had played hard. He knew his teammate had given it his all. And here's what B.J. Hill demonstrated. he demonstrated that he valued Joseph Osai as a person more than he valued what he could get out of him as a teammate. And so I want to encourage all of us today that we need to be to our friends the kind of friend that B.J. Hill was to Joseph Osai. When friends fail, well, listen, this is good preaching I'm about to do right here. When friends fail, they do not need their friends to evaluate their failure. They don't need their friend to play Mr. Objective and point out why it really is understandable why all these people are frustrated with you. What we need in the moment of failure are friends to value us enough as people to come to our aid and defend us, even if they may share the frustrations that others have with our mistake. Be that kind of friend to your friends. Now, I'm not saying friends don't ever challenge or correct. They do. But in a moment of failure with a friend who is aware of their failure and hurting because of their failure, a friend needs to uplift. A friend needs to encourage. A friend needs to defend. And when we fail, we need to give our friends the opportunity to come through for us. And so when we fail, we should go to our friends. We should press into our friends. It shouldn't cause us to withdraw. And of course, this applies to family members as well. Here's what Proverbs 17:17 says: a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for a time of adversity. Galatians 6:2, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. And then Ecclesiastes 4:9 and 10, two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up, but pity anyone who falls and has no one to help him up. These verses really provide excellent definitions of friendship. Love at all times, born for adversity, there in adversity, carry the other person's burden, pick up a fallen friend. These are great definitions of friendship, and these verses should guide us as to the kind of friends we should be to our friends. And I want to just encourage you today, if you don't feel that you currently are that kind of friend to your friends, become one. Become one. It just takes a change of mind. It just takes a willingness, an exercise of your will to say, I'm going to be a better friend to the people around me. I'm going to be a better friend when my friends are in need. So choose to become that kind of friend. And I want to encourage those of you who don't feel like you currently have a friend like this, find one. So, well, that's easy to say. I know it's easy to say and harder to do. But here's the reality. There are people who are these kinds of friends. And you actually have a decent chance of finding them, because here's what I'm finding in the world today. Most people are underfriended. And so they're on the lookout for friends. And so if you show yourself friendly, there's a decent chance you're going to find a friend. Because people need friends. They're looking for friends. But here's the reality. Most of us already have at least one friend, one family member that is there or would be there for us, like these verses describe. They are our B.J. Hill. And so when we fail, we have to be willing to go to the support of family and friends to receive that from them. But in addition to family and friends, and because even the best of friends can sometimes love us imperfectly and not come through exactly as we wish they would have come through in every situation, the next thing that we have to keep in mind when we've failed and we're dealing with the disappointment of failure is that we have to turn to our most important friendship, and that's God. Christian, God really needs to be your most important, your closest friend. He really does. It's vitally important that God is your closest friend. Proverbs 18:24 says, one who has unreliable friends soon comes to ruin, but there is a friend that sticks closer than a brother. Now, this verse emphasizes three important things about friendship. It teaches that we need to choose our friends very carefully. The quality of your friends is extremely important to your life, so choose them carefully. It also teaches that it's better to have one reliable friend than a lot of friends that can't be counted on. And then the third thing is that this description, a friend that sticks closer than a brother, it can be a description that applies to our friends throughout life, our human friends. But this description, a friend that sticks closer to a brother, is most applicable. It is the most descriptive of God. That God is our friend who sticks closer than a brother. Here's one of the reasons why God has to be our closest friend. Because God has capabilities that none of our human friends have. Let me mention just a few. God is always with us. There is no human friend that can always be with us. Even with texting, even with phones, they can't always be with us. God is always with us. Here's a capability that God has that our human friends don't have. God is our friend that knows our thoughts better than we know our thoughts. Our other friends, they have to work with what we give them through the communication of words and body language. But God is our friend who knows us better than we know ourselves. He knows our thoughts. He's always with us. He is in that place in our minds, that place in our consciousness that nobody else ever gets to, where it's really just us. But God's there. God's in that place with us. We think this is the place where we're alone. Nobody knows my inner thoughts. God does. That's how intimate God is with you. He's a friend that has capabilities other friends don't have. And so when we fail, we should turn to God. He should be our closest friend. He's always with us. He can speak to hurts that we've never even articulated. He can understand things that we've never even explained. He's always there. Hebrews 13:5-6. God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. And so we say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? God is our friend who is closer than a brother. He's our friend who will never leave us. And then Matthew 11:28, Jesus, our friend, says this, come unto me, all who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest. I'll give you rest. It is completely valid to insert the cause of your weariness and burden into this passage. And so we can read it like this. Come unto me, all who are weary and burdened by your failures, and I'll give you rest. Come unto me, all who are weighed down by the disappointment in yourself, and I will give you rest. God is our friend who will give us rest. These three things are indispensable to responding well to the disappointment of failure. They are key tools that enable us to face failure without being crushed by failure. Remember who you are, receive the support of friends and family, and turn to your most important friend, your trustworthy friend, God. And when we do these things, we know that we have inherent value that's not based on success or failure. We know that our value is because of who we are and not what we do. We know that there are people who love us and have by their actions shown that we are valuable to them. And we have received grace and encouragement from our most important and closest friend who never heaps condemnation on us even when we fail, but always is there to encourage us and get us on the right track. And knowing all of this and receiving all of that, here's what we're able to do every single time that we fail. we're able to get up, we're able to brush ourselves off, and try again. And keep trying. Again and again, no matter how many times we fail. Because you see, failure never changes God's plan for you. You have never failed big enough that it changed God's intentions or God's plans for you. Failure doesn't change that God has plans for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future, as Jeremiah 29:11 tells us. Failure doesn't change that having begun a good work in you, God will carry it on to completion until the day of Jesus Christ, as Philippians 1:6 tells us. God doesn't change his mind about you because you fail at work. He doesn't change his mind about you because you fail at relationships. He doesn't change his mind even if you fail him. Because your value to God isn't based on what you do, whether you succeed or fail. You have inherent value to God. And so when we fail, when you fail, here's what you need to do, what God wants you to do. You simply submit your failure to God. You just lay it down in front of him. You stop carrying it and you just lay it down in front of God and you leave it with him. Here it is. I leave it with you. You just step away from it. You keep trusting God and you keep moving forward. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not into your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him and he will make your paths straight. Again, it's proper to personalize the text to our circumstances. When you've failed and you're wrestling with disappointment, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Don't lean to your own understanding. Submit your failure and your disappointment to him, and God will make your paths straight. Everyone fails. You are not alone in this. You're in good company. Everyone. Everyone. You don't need to allow the failures, even the really significant ones, to crush you. They shouldn't, because you have inherent value that has nothing to do with your performance. You're loved by God. You are loved by friends. You're created in the image of God. If we will get those truths in us, like really deep down into our spirit, and if they're not in you, this is a prayer point for you this week. God, get these truths in me so that I believe them with every fiber of my being. Because if you'll get those truths in you, then failure does not have to crush you, and it won't crush you. You'll learn from it, but you will not be crushed by it. Everyone fails. Learn from it. Get up. Keep going. Keep trying. Keep moving forward. Confident in who you are and confident in who loves you. Let's stand.